Welcome to the Far Cry 5 MBTI and Enneagram Seed Family Analysis. We're going to be looking to the personalities of John Seed, Jacob Seed, and Faith Seed. And oh boy, they are interesting. We'll be starting off with John Seed. But before we get into that, we're going to have to figure out who he was before and how he ended up becoming such a corrupt individual. John Seed was born in 1986, Rome, Georgia, United States. He was adopted by the Duncan family, who were very wealthy and highly religious. But there was a problem. The Duncan family believed that John's soul was tainted, which led them to psychologically torture John into confessing all his sins for years on end, which resulted in his indoctrination of believing he is tainted. So he started looking for more issues within himself. And eventually, it came to the point where he started looking at others and looking for issues within them. This, of course, wouldn't satisfy his need to fill the hole within his heart. During his later years, he decided to become a lawyer. His family eventually passed, and he obtained their wealth. And with that wealth, he decided to redevelop his childhood neighborhood. Despite this, he disliked himself and society and wanted its destruction due to his childhood. And later down the line, he met Joseph, and Joseph decided to appoint him as the confessor of Eden's Gate to use his abilities. This in turn gave John purpose, and that will conclude his backstory. And now we're going to be starting his MBTI analysis. I believe John's first function is NE. John's job is to make you confess to your sins, and he does this by watching and observing your patterns. He has a pretty good understanding how events, actions, and people are all connected, and he figures out your sin relatively quickly. Your sin is wrath, by the way. Another NE indicator is his desire to make things happen. He wants to put a dent in the world and in you by making you say yes. He wants to open up all the possibilities of everything by saying yes. He wants to find a way to change you and improve you.
I spent my entire life looking for more things to say yes to. I opened every hole in my body, and when those were filled, I created more. I'm going to open you and pour your worst fears inside. And as you choke, your sins will reveal themselves. Only then will you truly understand the power of yes.
And I use improve very lightly. Essentially, he wants to change you to what he believes is the best. And that will lead to our next function, which is TI. You see, John's really clever. He allows you to escape when you first get captured by him, because he wants to see if his theory of you being wrath is true. And in a way, he kind of forces it to become true. He makes you face everyone, and he starts questioning you. And he asks you, do you not have remorse for people that you kill? Do you not notice this problem? Even though it's malicious, he wants to promote critical thinking. He wants you to look inwards and think of the actions that you are committing.
Your sin consumes you, blinds you to all the harm you inflict. It allows you to dispense of human life so easily. Have you ever given so much as a second thought to killing?
He also has a very interesting theory about sin. He believes in order to combat sin and set yourself free, you first must etch the sin onto your skin.
To own your sin, to etch it onto your flesh and carry its burden.
The next step is to face your sin. At this point, you're going to go through an ocean of pain in order to combat against it.
Say yes, so you can confront your weaknesses, confront your sins. You will swim across an ocean of pain and emerge free.
And once that's done, you're going to reach step 3. And step 3 is to rip your sin out of your flesh and display it for the world to see.
When you have truly begun to atone, to cut it out like a cancer and display it for all to see. My God, that's courage.
And that will give you courage, and that will make you strong, and that will make you free from the sin, and it will never affect you again. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the power of yes.
Power of yes.
Which now leads to our tertiary function, FE, extroverted feeling. John is quite skilled at manipulation. When you first see him, he's on the TV, and he's making an ad for his cult. And in this ad, he's preaching unity and how we could be together as a big family. And if not, we're just gonna find you, make you part of our family.
You will be offered atonement. Don't worry. You don't have to do anything. We'll come for you.
Another indicator of his FE function is how blunt and honest he is about his feelings. He becomes very vocal and expressive when you agree with him.
It's the power of yes!
And his tone drastically changes when you disagree with him.
Fuck's sake, we'll start with you.
However, because he's so unhealthy, he resorts to screaming and breaking things like a toddler would. And this can be seen when you disagree to say yes to him. You can really see his past trauma get stuck within this FE function. And speaking of trauma, we're about to go to his inferior function, which is SI, introverted sensing. As you can tell, this function is overdeveloped, and that's not good for anyone who's in any dom. The issue of this is it guides him throughout his life. His idea and power of yes is driven by the abuse he received when he was a child. This obsession is so bad that he puts yes everywhere. This is his main slogan in life, yes to everything, which indoctrinated him as a child. He was brought up to feel shame within himself, and now he projects that shame onto others.
My parents were the first ones to teach me about the power of yes. One night they took me into the kitchen and they threw me on the ground, and I experienced pain after pain after pain after pain. And when I didn't think I could take any more, I did.
The reason why his NE is so open to the idea of yes and finding sins within others is because it happened to him, and he's been conditioned by that. Yes, he kidnaps people. Yes, he tortures them. And yes, he's become a monster, something he never wanted to become. But most of all, yes, he's a victim.
You want this key? Because you think you're saving people, but they are already safe. We had a plan. You don't understand. You don't believe. You don't care! May God have mercy on your soul.
This doesn't excuse his actions, however, but I'm preaching in a way for you to understand why he does what he does. Joseph understands that he means well, however, he doesn't end up doing so well. And that's the analysis of John Seed. And the conclusion is that he's an ENTP, a very unhealthy one that over-relies on his SI function due to trauma. Our next victim, Seed, is Jacob Seed. Unlike John, Jacob's story is a lot shorter than his. Jacob was born 1974 in Rome, Georgia, United States. Just like John, he was also taken in by foster parents, to which he fought constantly in order to defend his brothers. Eventually, he burned down the house and got sent to juvenile detention center, where he continued to become more rebellious. After serving his sentence, he ended up joining the army, and he served in the Gulf War in Iraq. And this is where everything went wrong. During his time in Iraq, he got separated from his unit with one of his friends. They had to walk 200 kilometers to the nearest base. They ran out of food, and eventually he had to kill and cannibalize his friend. This is what started his obsession of survival and strength. He was discharged for having PTSD and then ended up becoming homeless, until Joseph and John found him and made him the military leader of their cult. This in turn gave him purpose. And now we're going to start his analysis. I believe his first function is SI, introverted sensing. The first thing you notice about Jacob is his army shirt. He keeps it on because he cannot let go of the past. He is scarred by his demons, and he took it home with him. He doesn't bother trying to change his ways. Instead, he's the opposite of John, and he embraces his past, and he uses that to predict the future.
But history knows the value of sacrifice, of culling the herd so that it stays strong.
He looks into himself and his experiences and says, "This is what happened to me. This is what needs to happen to society. And oh boy, does he ever act on that. He puts people through the same torture he went through.
Oh, you must be hungry. Yeah. Did you know it takes 10 days for civilization to collapse? Yeah. You take away a man's basic needs and he will revert to his primordial instincts in just 10 days. That's a difficult thing to understand unless you've lived it.
Another indicator of his SI function is the Grandview Hotel. Once you raid it the first time to become saved yourself, he uses it again to capture more soldiers, even though he knows the whitetails know where it is. So why would you use the same base of operations a second time? It makes no sense. This is where that introverted sensing function comes in. He knows the area and he's comfortable within it. He doesn't want to venture into new areas within life. He likes being comfortable and staying within what he knows. And when it comes to new lessons, he's very wary. We'll mention SI again, but we'll tie it in with his next function, which is TE, extroverted thinking. You see, when he tortures people, he uses the same method over and over. He doesn't discriminate individuals. For him, it doesn't matter. You are meat, and you are a tool.
You are a tool. You know your purpose.
Another interesting indicator, which is correlated to TE, is his need for control of his environment. He believes in order to live life efficiently and correctly, you must be strong. You cannot be weak. If you show weakness, you will fall. And if you fall, guess what? You're weak. And if you're weak, you're going to get culled by the herd. Only the strong are allowed to survive.
You're alone. And you're weak. And we know what happens to the weak. I call the herd. It's what I do.
His tertiary function is FI. And you could see this when it comes to his judgment of who's strong and who's weak. And this comes from his own personal emotional experience and his trauma from being stranded with his friend for days on end, and then eventually realizing that he has to kill and eat his friend in order to survive. He can't be weak.
One night there was an ambush. And me and this guy named Miller got separated from the unit. No food. No radio. Nearest base, 200 clicks to the south, so we just started walking. Well, by the third day I knew we were lost. Day 6, ran out of water. You know what that's like, don't you? Difficult to swallow. On the 7th day, Miller's legs started going all wonky. Did you know your brain starts to eat your muscles in order to survive? That's why you're so goddamn skinny. And by the 8th day, the wolves were closing in. And I looked at Miller and I could tell we were as good as dead. And I accepted that. And in that acceptance came clarity. You see, I wasn't just looking at Miller. I was looking at an opportunity. It wasn't something I wanted. It was something that I had to do.
Another indicator of FI is how he's very unique with each one of his victims he deals with. Yes, he's doing the same thing to everyone, but he finds ways to relate with them. He wants to be like, I experienced this. This is how I felt from it. You're going to feel what I feel. Understand my feelings. He's pretty much projecting his emotions of pain and suffering into others because he believes it made him strong, therefore it's going to make them strong. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if someone's strong or not. It's what he believes is true. Only he decides if you are strong or you're weak. His final function is NE, extroverted intuition. Jacob has a really weird NE in a way. It's not completely developed. However, he is able to figure out patterns relatively quickly. And first, we're going to start with an example of his NE not being developed enough. He allows Pratt to wander around his little fortress freely and watch his coworker stuck in a cage. Why doesn't he think Pratt is going to betray him at some point? He's so confident in his indoctrination abilities that he doesn't think of other possibilities that could happen. Of course, Pratt betrays him at the end.
It's almost time. I've studied the route for weeks. It's the only way out. You'll be safe if you don't.
Speaking of Pratt, he also allows Pratt to shave his neck in front of Rook as an intimidation tactic. What happens if Pratt cuts open his neck? He's not thinking of that. Again, he doesn't really have foresight of what can happen. His view of possibilities is very limited. Even though his NE is not developed enough to see future possibilities, it is developed enough to see patterns, and he's able to recognize those within human behavior. He knows how to control you like an animal. He pulls the strings like a puppeteer. However, there's another indicator where his NE is not developed enough again. And this is when you finally kill Eli. Instead of having you shoot yourself in the head, he invites you outside. He doesn't take into the consideration that you're gonna kill him. Instead, he figures, oh no, I got this one already. I have like 1,000 dudes outside. This person is drugged out of their mind. I have the indoctrination song playing in the background. It's gonna be really easy to kill them. However, when you finally defeat him, he's surprised. And he reverts back to his belief that empires will rise and empires will fall, and America is no different.
Humanity is once again in crisis. It doesn't matter what we build or achieve. We will always find a way to break it down. Babylon, Rome, empires rise, empires fall. America, we're no different.
Humanity will always destroy itself. And that concludes our analysis of Jacob Seed. The conclusion is, he's a broken but intelligent ISTJ. And now that the brothers are out of the way, we're finally going to the final sister. And she's not really part of the Seed family. She was a lonely girl who was adopted by Joseph Seed and the rest of the family. And also, she's a complete sociopath. If anything, she's the scariest one in this list. Faith, aka Rachel Jessup, was born in 1994, Hope County, Montana, United States. She was born to a rich family. Her father was a doctor who experimented with plants in order to help people, while her mother grew orchards in her greenhouses. Faith suffered a lot of abuse in her life from bullies, mainly because she wanted to keep the peace at all times, which means she avoided all fights and the bullies saw her as a pushover. During her childhood, she met Tracy, who ended up becoming her friend. They both ran away to join the Free Spirit movement in the West, where they just smoked up most of the days and banged drums, and just wanted to have a good time. But as time passed, this no longer was a leisure activity and ended up becoming an addiction, where they were both thrown out of their community. Both Tracy and Faith went their own ways. Faith eventually ran into Joseph, who invited her to join his cult and gave her purpose. She cleaned up, and eventually Joseph gave her scopolamine, which is known as the devil's breath. On the side note, this plant actually exists in real life and is the source of the bliss in the game. The effects are feeling drowsiness, cloudy vision, incoherent speech, and frightening hallucinations. And we can't forget that it wipes most of your memory and enforces a lack of free will, so you're easily controlled. I mean, that's pretty terrifying. Anyways, I digress. We're gonna go back to Faith, and we're gonna analyze her right now. Faith's primary function is FI, which is introverted feeling. And oh boy, it is truly overwhelming. Everything she does revolves around how she feels and how she thinks you should feel. It's all about her morals, her ideals, her values. And if you decide to go against her, you're immediately the bad guy.
Don't understand. Did you think you could just continue to do what you wanted without consequences? I've been reasonable, I've been fair. But you were just so selfish.
These are telltale signs of an extremely overdeveloped and unhealthy FI function. Another sign of her unhealthy FI usage is her shifts within her mood.
One day, the father brought her here. He asked if she had faith in him. He asked if she would be willing to die for him. The young woman who very much wished to live was scared. The father told her her test. He would have faith in her if she had faith in him. So she closed her eyes and left.
FI is known to be more moody than FE users because they internalize their emotions and they feel it more intensely. Faith seems to take that and bring it to the next level. I'm not sure if she's bipolar, but her emotions shift so fast and quickly that might be the case. She goes from being sad from 1 second to being an angel in the sky the next second. I could probably go on about her FI usage and how it's crazy and extreme, but we're going to move on to her next function, which is complemented by her FI function in such scary ways. And that secondary function is NE, external intuition. And this is why Faith is so good at manipulating people and figuring them out so fast. She is a master at patterns. She recognizes certain human behaviors and then she mimics them on purpose to see if her theories are true. And this is where she starts playing with her words. She tries tricking you into believing that what she says is true.
Joseph believes he's our savior. But you will be the one who decides what happens. You are the start. He'll be the end. It was always going to happen this way.
In a similar way, she acts like John. She looks at patterns and she looks at the conclusions and she finds a way to get into your head. John does that too. However, John likes to test you first to see if his theories are true. Faith doesn't care. Faith is more concerned about her feelings, about how you feel, and then she'll find a way to manipulate you through the possibilities that she sees. Another indicator of Faith's NE function is her excitement to dabble in the unknown and to watch others dabble in that too. When she puts you on top of the shrine, she asks you to jump. You don't really have a choice, but she wants you to experience jumping off it and going to something that you thought was not possible. She wants to open your mind, because if she succeeds at that, then she could finally convince you that she's right. And the final example we're going to be using for NE is how she always keeps the possibility of you being able to join the cult as open-ended, even though you are clearly against her.
Your sheriff was a wall between you and the Father. A wall that kept you from seeing his truth. I will knock down that wall. Why do you keep fighting us? You know what's coming. The Father showed you. The world is crashing to an end. It is diseased and corrupt. The Father is offering you a chance to let go. To stop worrying. To be free.
Faith's tertiary function is SI, introverted sensing. And this function is overdeveloped. Remember how I said in the past that she used drugs to escape life?
She took to a needle for help. She was all alone. She wanted to die.
Well, here she is using drugs on other people. She's repeating her past over and over, but on others. And the worst part about it is, she's not even being malicious with it. She believes this truly brings people peace. Freedom of choice is hard. You shouldn't need to use that. Instead, you should listen to me. I will make you feel better. This is pretty much what she preaches. And the irony of this all is she's still a victim of that. She doesn't have free will herself. She's literally controlled by Joseph. She fears him.
You think I wanted this? He plied me with drugs. He threatened me. I was 17. I was just a child.
With that being said, we're going to be moving on to her final function. And that function is TE, extroverted thinking. Faith neglects responsibility. She prefers not to deal with it. She prefers just feeling good and doing her own thing. However, when pushed, Faith could become ruthless and highly effective. An example of this is when you stop Marshall Burke from entering the gates of Eden in order to complete his indoctrination. And by doing this, we save him from becoming an angel. Faith doesn't take this well. She's furious with the fact that you denied him the choice of entering Eden's gate, and she vows revenge against you. She accomplishes this by taking over Marshall Burke's body. She pulls out his gun, and she shoots Virgil for no reason. And then, she opens up the gates and commands her cult members to kidnap Earl Whitehorse. And she does all this just because you denied someone the choice to join her little cult. And the scary part is, she succeeds.
Also, you could be what? A hero? Do you know what hubris is? Arrogance before the gods. The Greeks saw it as a dangerous form of pride that invoked the goddess Nemesis, who would seek retribution.
I win this hand. You have to wear a button. What do you say?
Straight flush.
If violence is the only language you choose to speak, I'll speak your language. And when their blood is on your hands,
And when their blood is on your hands,
we'll see how heroic you feel.
see how heroic you feel.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry to have to do
I'm
this.
sorry to have to do this.
I wanted there to be another way.
I wanted there to be another way.
But you made your choice.
But you made your choice.
Who opened the doors?
They're inside!
I told you. I didn't want to leave.
And that's the only example we have of her using TE, other than the little empire she's been running, to which she built up herself, but with mind-altering drugs, so you don't really have a choice. And with that all being said, that'll conclude that Faith Seed is a sociopath and an unhealthy INFP. And that concludes the MBTI analysis of the Seed family. But wait, there's more! We still have the Enneagram to go through, and luckily for us, Enneagrams are very easy to read. And we're going to start off with John's Seed. When I look at John, I see one thing, and it's a very prevalent trait. He avoids boredom like the plague. His whole crusade of finding people's sins and going through the motions of prodding their brains is just him avoiding being bored. And this is so important that he'll find a way to prolong these sessions of torture, even though he knows what your sin is. His wing is 8, and it just adds to the unhealthiness that he's going through. However, there's something interesting here. 8's biggest fear is being controlled. Through his younger years, he was controlled, and now he uses that same control on others. This is why he's sadistic. His 8 function health is so low it's ridiculous. And that concludes that John's Seed is a 7-wing 8. Next up, we have Jacob's Seed. Unlike John, Jacob is not in it for the moment. Instead, what he truly values is control and strength. His beliefs dictate that if man is weak, man does not deserve to live, which is a clear indicator of a very unhealthy 8. Almost all his actions involve him controlling others. Because if you control others, they can't control you. Therefore, your biggest fear will not occur. His wing seems to be 9. Which will lead to his second biggest fear, to lose and be separated by others. And we're referring to the others as in his family. He doesn't really believe in what Joseph says. He doesn't care. He's just doing it because he wants to feel as if he's part of something. And that's why he chooses to ignore his own pain. He beats himself up, however, he won't tell anyone because that is a sign of weakness. And if he's weak, people won't accept him. And the only person that could see this is Joseph's Seed, which concludes that Jacob's Seed is an 8-wing 9. And our final subject is Faith's Seed. The biggest trait I seem to notice within Faith is that she avoids responsibility. She shuns it. She throws it away. She prefers to live in her own fantasy dreamland and have others lead her. She also seems to have an obsession with keeping the peace and avoiding conflict, which ties into the basic fear of 9. And that fear is to lose or be separated by others. And because of that, they're peacekeepers who want to minimize conflict and live in harmony with others. Faith, of course, takes that to an extreme and brainwashes people and makes them have no rights. People will accept you 100% if they can't think. Now, the next question is, what's her wing? Is it 8 or 1? And in this case, I'm leaning towards 1. 1's biggest fear is being incorrect or out of control. especially when they view injustice in the world. They are motivated by their strong sense of what they believe is right or wrong. This is why Fate becomes so offended when you take away Marshall Burke's choice of joining the cult, because she believes that is a great injustice. And the irony here is she takes away people's choice and their ability to reason, and she doesn't think that's a great injustice either. And that concludes my analysis of Faith Seed. I believe she's a 9-wing 1. And that concludes our Enneagram segment of this too. I'd like to thank you very much for watching this. If you obviously enjoy what you see, feel free to leave a subscription. And that's all. Have a nice evening, day, or night, or whatever time period you're in. See you later.